more honor and more self-awareness and more self-compassion and compassion and love for others. You want to be a government for the people, by the people. You also have to be an enforcement for the people, by the people.
We've welcomed in maybe 12 people to be the jury of our peers. I put forward my claim. He has put forward his evidence. So we're only held to the degree of our own honor.
Project Override.
The beginning.
All right, session 6.
Yeah, Project Override.
Yeah.
Yeah, here we come.
Talking about
Some of the fun stuff.
yeah, prepare for some heavy conversation.
Yeah.
Courts, jurisdiction,
Bills and acts.
bills, acts, statutes, rules, regulations. So we'll do the disclaimer again because I'm not traditionally studied as a lawyer. I don't claim to be a lawyer. Everything that I've researched into law, legalities, I have done my own research. I have read statutes. I've gone out of my way to look into archives, to check the Queen's printer, the official places where you should look for these things. All of my studies I have applied. I have sent off notices, different contracts to government, and I've gotten different results, and then I modified the way I go about handling my own administrative affairs. Are you a lawyer?
No. No. But I do believe that we all, as we've stated earlier, we all have the right to self-determination. So the concept of having to be an expert in said field to have a valid opinion or to be educated in the areas of that field that you deem to understand, it is perfectly within our capacity and our rights. And the concept of experts sort of needs to be, relooked at in terms of how we look at information and knowledge and access to information and validity of information. So again, we are just saying that we aren't lawyers, but we are proposing a way to bridge the current system as we understand it. And that's the important piece to remember, I think, here.
This is all our own studies and law and courts jurisdiction as we understand it.
Yeah, the merits of our own education that we've chosen to look into and partake in. Yeah.
And if you choose to do your own research and you choose to go to a lawyer for advice, remember that lawyers are the modern day priests for the illiterate. So you have the power to look into these statutes and rules and regulations and decipher them for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So it's pretty absurd, the amount of rules and regulations out there, don't you think?
It's unreal. It's like an endless loophole.
So we got like housing crisis here with rents going up. We have the onslaught of fear about food shortages, and current regulations basically restrict people in this area that you need a license to, butcher that chicken and process that meat. Oh, and you need approval if you want to build another shelter for someone else to live on your land. You're only allowed 2.
Yeah.
There's all these things that are actually restricting the ability to save ourselves.
The dairy mafia.
Oh, raw milk.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got a cow share?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So there's the cow share because you can't sell raw milk. And sometimes if you do want to buy meat that was processed by someone, they have to go to refer to it as dog food in order to sell it. And I feel that's a bit demeaning. We're talking about food that we all can enjoy. So the courts, from the last session, we were segueing into the courts. We were talking about enforcement. We have this quorum voting protocol that would allow for the masses in a geographic area to come to some sort of consensus around a proposal or a change in rules that everybody adheres and agrees to. But the problem is, how do we actually enforce that? And if there came to be a dispute, how do we resolve that?
Mm-hmm.
So traditionally we have
Well, traditionally we have a very convoluted system of lawyers, hearsay, courts, people we don't know passing judgment on situations they have no connection to. Um, so we were talking about the idea of like a jury of your peers and how you might implement that. And I think you had some fantastic stuff you brought up. So
Right, yeah. So we'll talk about the technology in a bit, but the jury of the peers has always been this talking point for people who speak about the common law movement, or they're speaking about, we don't want to participate in maritime law, we want to participate in the law of the land. And in order to resolve a current dispute, the two parties that are having an adversarial position on something, they may wish to use the land courts and to have a trial by the jury of their peers. So, depending on who controls the jurisdiction of the land, I'm not too sure. Where this magical area, the law of the land, where we can actually get dispute resolution, where is it? So we have to create that if it's non-existent, and we need to have it so that people can verify that it has gone through at least a process that people have witnessed, verified, has a high degree of confidence that some sort of enforcement can come through and carry out the final judgment.
yeah.
So we're speaking about courts, and you were talking about it's kind of a last resort.
It is. Well, I think courts should be a last resort because, and again, we're talking ideal situations. Moving towards a more transparent way of living, a more honorable way of living. In that is also, I think, it's inherently part of that you would settle. I mean, I hate to use this quote, but settle with your brother on the way to court. So, that concept that if I have an issue with Mark, say regarding a land dispute or something like that, theoretically, or a failed contract, or say we had a business transaction gone sour, we are perfectly capable, and if we're mature and responsible adults, we're perfectly capable of resolving that man to man, or woman to woman, or person to person. You're not bound by some external authority, and you don't have to go and basically like bog up this system with menial things, and you can save courts for bigger issues, resolving, say, abuse or other issues that truly need arbitration. Or we could theoretically have a local, just in our community, we'd put out the call on the blockchain that we want to have a little community meeting to resolve an issue. And it doesn't need to go beyond that community. And it would allow for a fully functional, streamlined way of having courts on a local municipal level that, I guess, simplifies the process that we have now.
Right.
Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. So,
Yeah.
Speaking to the technology and applying that concept and actually having it work in our reality, we're looking at, again, we're setting up these foam zones, these zone anchors that create almost like they're creating their own jurisdiction in which we can have some sort of dispute resolution. So years ago, I got into foam, and they had the ability to set up signals. And so when you're setting up a signal on the foam map, you're saying this area needs service to create this proof of location protocol. We want it here. So what I did was I went to a bunch of major cities within Canada, and I put signals at the main post office and the main courthouses. And so as I was dreaming up the application of future technology, I thought, well, how does one really implement dispute resolution or implement courts in this parallel system? So imagine you had a zone at a courthouse and at the post office. We can utilize the current system that's there. So I have a complaint or a claim against Tad. I can simply draft up a registered mail envelope, maybe put in a little NFC or some sort of device that when it's mailed to the courthouse, the zone that we set up around the courthouse recognizes the claim has landed. So now, using proof of location, we have a documented, along with the post office system registered mail, we have proof that, okay, a claim has landed and it's attached to Tad's ID. And now there is an initiated countdown for a court proceeding. We don't really need to go into the courthouse because we're utilizing a parallel system. So we can leave the courts alone. And now we can be in the area outside the courthouse. We've welcomed in maybe 12 people to be the jury of our peers. Mm-hmm. I put forward my claim. He has time to dispute that and put forward his evidence. And then we can depending on what the time period is, the quorum voting protocol, of course, is 21-21, 3 to equal 45. Maybe it's a smaller time frame because we don't want to bog down the system. Maybe we can speed up the dispute resolution. So the jury of the peers show up, they verify they're there, they witness what's happening in that proceeding, and then essentially we both have agreed to have these peers come to a final decision. Where the enforcement comes in, that's by our consent. So we're only held to the degree of our own honor. And this is the same, of course, in the regular courts. But of course, they use the personal property registry and liens that if you do owe me a bunch of money, that's logged within their registries.
Well, they also use the threat of punishment as the enforcement measure. So we're very used to that as well. How do you enforce that? Well, we think that there needs to be punishment, but what we're proposing is that by gaining more transparency, hopefully we gain more honor and more self-awareness and more self-compassion and love for others that allows for these agreements to be self-regulated, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you want to be a government for the people, by the people, you also have to be an enforcement for the people, by the people, and you have to act accordingly. You have to honor that which you've agreed to.
Right.
Right? Because right now it's very different.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have in current system, like an enforcement order may be put in place on a registry somewhere. Using the current technology in the parallel system, we could essentially have the conclusion of the dispute resolution logged as it could be a non-fungible token, an NFT, that then is attached to Tad, his ID, that he owes me or I owe him, or the final resolution is that. And so whether or not that can be removed off his ID, that's something that we haven't sorted through yet. So we welcome anybody's ideas with this kind of experiment of thought.
Yes. Well, again, that's where we come back to the idea that we really want to be able to implement this on like trial runs on local levels, because that's where ideas will be formulated, stuff tested out, you see what works, what doesn't, and that's how we will get to a new parallel system that functions and operates and has a very strong moral or ethical code. And eventually, you know, maybe there's a better word than enforcement. I don't know.
Right.
Right. But
yeah. The muscle.
the muscle. Yeah, exactly. Strength. It has a strength of its own, right? It can stand on its own 2 feet.
So that goes along, the enforcement goes along with the jurisdiction. We didn't touch too much on jurisdiction. But essentially with, say, setting up these zones, if it's not courts, maybe it's just a free trade zone where goods and services are being sold. But this free trade zone, if you're utilizing, say, a proof of location standard, by entering into that location, there is a pre-agreement, just like clicking the box for agree to terms and conditions. But this is set up a free trade zone that whatever that community has decided on the rules, where we have certain raw milk here that we're selling, And we as a community agree that that's okay to be
Yeah.
sold. And
Yeah.
so we're overriding nonsensical regulations that have bogged down freedom, essentially, free
Yeah.
trade.
Yeah, and that ties into like a very important issue, I think, for a lot of us, which is food security. And I don't know, do you have any final words you want to add about jurisdiction?
Yeah,
Before we
so
kind of move on there?
that was kind of the segue was there's going to be a lot of what ifs. We addressed that if we were to approach this matter, we would have to do it by trial and error and have other people's input about how to make this a better system, especially talking about courts. But that other jurisdiction will continue to exist. In Canada, we have the Crown's jurisdiction, Corporate Canada's Crown's jurisdiction. And so that's where we have talked about contracts before, correcting one's status, moving someone's status out of the current contract you have with your current government, or rearranging the relationship with your current government. You don't necessarily have to leave that other jurisdiction, but we have to be aware that there may be dual jurisdictions operating.
Yeah.
And the merit of the jurisdictions we now join into is up for us to decide.
Yeah.
And I guess that goes into licenses, copyrights, patents, and how jurisdictions are formed in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. And that'll be session 7. See you there.
See you there.
Project override.